Doctor, I remind you, you're still under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, I want to roll back a little bit in what we were talking about this morning. We had a slide up that was talking about collection of evidence. I think I skipped an item. Did you pull any of Taylor's scalp hair as an example to send for later testing?
Yes.
And why did you pull that hair from her head?
It's one of our standard protocols that we will do in any case they're suspected of being a homicide. And it's so that the lab has a comparison sample of known sample of the person that we're doing the autopsy on.
And what did you do with that pulled hair sample after you removed it from Taylor's head?
Yeah, we put it in an envelope and then put it evidence tape and then have that ready for picked up for evidence.
Like the ones we talked about this morning?
Yes.
All right. And did this Scott County Sheriff's Office pick up that pulled hair sample for transport to the DCI lab?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to move on to your next slide. As part of your autopsy, did you remove and photograph Taylor's brain?
Yes.
And why would you do that?
One of the purpose of the autopsy is to determine cause and manner of death, and so one of the areas of injury that can cause death is injury to the brain. So I need to examine the brain to see if there were injuries that could have contributed to the cause of death.
Okay. And you photographed her brain after you removed it?
Yes.
Okay. So in this slide, going left to right, we see States Exhibits 7-138, 7-139, and 7-137. Can you tell us what you've documented in these photographs?
Yeah, so these are different views of the brain. So the brain has been removed, and prior to removal, there are different layers overlying the brain. So there's the skull, and then there's a covering called the dura mater, and then under that is the brain. And so blood can accumulate if there's been injury to the head. So at the time I was doing the autopsy, I noticed that there was blood overlying the brain. That has since been washed off. And then there's another layer called subarachnoid hemorrhage. So there's like a little thin, almost like tissue paper membrane that's over the brain. And you can see this dark area. That is not normal. That means that there was injury to that area. So the brain was shaken or disturbed such that small little blood vessels were broken and blood leaks out. So that's how I know that there was injury to the brain. If there's enough injury or forces on the brain to cause this bleeding, we know that can also interfere with the function of the brain. So in clinical medicine, that might be a concussion. People might lose consciousness, and then eventually people can sometimes stop breathing or die from those injuries. So there are a couple different areas. This is the right side of the brain, and you can see that there's hemorrhage right here. This is the left side of the brain, and you can see that there's hemorrhage all in here. And then this is the underside of the brain. And right here, it's hard to see, but there was a small little bruise to the brain. And it doesn't necessarily mean that was the area that was hit, but if someone is hit somewhere in the head, the brain jostles and it hits the other side of the skull, because that's a firm, hard component of the body. And then we can see, again, there's all this subarachnoid hemorrhage in these different areas of the brain.
Right. Can you speak to the amount of force that would be necessary to cause the subarachnoid hemorrhaging we're seeing in these photos?
Yeah, when you start having subdural hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, that gets you into the severe level of injury. So that's what you would see in motor vehicle crashes, severe head trauma with being hit with something, or severe falls.
Is the subarachnoid hemorrhaging we're seeing in these photos consistent with what you might see as an outcome of someone being hit in the head with a baseball bat?
Yes.
And from the location on the brain where we had these hemorrhaging, can you correlate that to any of the injuries you saw on Taylor's skin?
No, there's no direct correlation of injury on one side and then directly underneath that. That oftentimes doesn't necessarily what happens. If there's enough force to actually fracture the skull, you'll actually get damage to the brain because of that fracture. There wasn't enough force to fracture the skull, but there was enough force to jostle the skull, which then jostled the brain, causing this bleeding and other injuries.
Can you tell whether the amount of subarachnoid hemorrhaging we're seeing in these photos, could it been caused by just one, I guess, discrete blow or blunt force trauma incident versus multiple blows would be necessary to cause what we're seeing here?
Right, I can't tease that out if it was one blow or an accumulation of multiple blows.
Okay. Is there anything else of significance to your findings in these three photos we have not talked about?
No.
In the next slide, we have exhibits left to right, 7-91A, 7-111, and 7-90. Can you please tell us what you've documented in these photos?
Yeah, so all these are stab wounds, so that would be from a knife entering into the body, and that means they're deeper than they are the width of the wound. The wound on the left, it's labeled K, that went into the chest wall, but it didn't really hit any internal organs. The picture in the middle, so this is on the left side, so the back is over here, front is over here, and you can see this is that slit-like injury. This was an important wound to note because when I did the internal part of the exam, this hit some vital structures. It struck the diaphragm, which is a muscle that exists between the lungs, which is on the lower chest, and the abdomen. And the way we breathe is you contract those diaphragm that pulls the chest down, that allows you to expand your lungs. So there was damage. The knife went through that diaphragm and damaged that lung. That also will cause that lung to collapse because air gets between the chest wall and the lung itself. The knife also injured the lung itself, so that caused bleeding, and essentially that lung is an important organ because that's how we exchange air. So we breathe off carbon dioxide and we take in oxygen, so you have to have functioning lungs to survive.
Was that particular stab wound potentially fatal just on its own?
Yes.
All right. And do we see any other injuries documented in these photos?
The only other one here is, this was on the mid-chest, and between the rib and the chest plate is cartilage, so that's a little bit softer than bone. So that just went into the cartilage but didn't actually penetrate through the entire chest wall.
All right. Could the knife we saw in State's exhibit, I believe it's 26, that you looked at this morning, could that have caused the stab wounds that we see in these three photos?
Yes.
And, excuse me, I believe it was exhibit 29. Can you speak to the amount of force that would be necessary to cause the injuries we see in this photo, or these photos?
Yeah, like I said before, the greatest resistance is going to be the force of that knife getting through the skin. Once it gets through the skin, it's pretty easy to push through the diaphragm and the lung.
It looks like we're seeing some reddish purple discoloration on her abdomen in the first photo, and then again on the side in the second photo. Can you tell us, is that a bruise? Is that something else? What are we looking at?
So that's, we sometimes refer to it as an artifact. And after a person dies, what can happen is blood can accumulate and become visible in the form of livor mortis. And so it tends to be on the gravitationally dependent areas. So if a person dies while they're on their back, you'll get this purplish color called livor mortis that'll develop there. If a person is face down, they'll get some accumulation on the front.
And so Taylor had some livor mortis, it looks like on her front side?
Yes.
And would that indicate that she had, after she died or while she was dying, she was on her front?
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the brain photos. I'm not going to put them up again, but the subarachnoid hemorrhaging we saw on its own, if Taylor didn't have other injuries, would the hemorrhaging be life-threatening?
It could. People can survive with subarachnoid hemorrhage, and some people die with subarachnoid hemorrhage. Subarachnoid hemorrhage is more of a marker of severe injury to the brain than the bleeding itself actually causing the death.
Going to the next slide, we've got left to right exhibit 7-109, 7-106, and 7-107. Now, what did you document in these photos?
So the picture on the far left shows, as indicated by the letter V, and that's the grouping of stab wounds on the back of the right shoulder. So all these wounds penetrate into the deltoid muscle, which is the muscle of the shoulder. Then there's stab wound T, which again went into the trapezius muscle, which is a large muscle that connects the head all the way down to the back and out to the shoulder blade. Again, these just went through the skin and into the underlying muscles, but did not penetrate into any vital organs. And then in these wounds right here, we see another screwdriver wounds, and we remember we saw these before lunch, those 4 wounds up there. And then these are the stab wounds, this one being the one that hit that membrane that connects the skull to the vertebral column.
For the knife-caused injuries, am I correct that everything we've seen so far represented a stab wound rather than an incision?
That's correct. All the wounds that we saw, except for some that we're going to see on the hands, were stab wounds, meaning that they're deeper than they are wide.
And can you speak to the amount of force that would be needed to create the injuries we see in these 3 photos?
So I think of all the wounds that would need the most amount of force would be the screwdriver injuries, because of the nature of how there's some blunt component to it. But there would still have to be some force to break the skin, even with the wounds caused by the knife.
And the screwdriver wounds were these top ones at the bottom of the scalp area?
Yes, and this wound right here on the upper right back.
All right. Is anything else documented in these 3 photos that was relevant to your findings and opinions that we've not talked about yet?
No, everything's covered.
The next slide, left to right, are exhibits 7-119 and 7-42. And what have you documented here?
I was wondering if it would be okay for the court to just turn the lights down a little so the jury could see the photos a little better. So in addition to lacerations which tear the skin, there's also contusions where if you have a blunt impact, small little blood vessels are going to break underneath. If you have an instrument like a bat and you hit the skin, what's going to happen is that bat is going to cause the blood to squish over to the sides. So you actually have 2 parallel lines of purple marking or contusions on the side. So that's a single blow. It's not 2 blows. So I apologize that it's not showing up quite as well as I'd hoped at being projected. But you see this is a bruise right here. And then I can describe them. This probably shows the best where you see that white line going there, and then there's a purple on either side. So that would be consistent with a bat or some sort of long instrument that strikes the body, and then that blood gets squished over either side. So there were at least 4 that we saw demonstrated in this picture, and there were a total of 6 that I was able to delineate while I was doing the autopsy.
When you say 4 and 6, 4 or 6 what?
Oh, there are 4 contusions that are demonstrated here, and there were 6 total on the back.
For those 6 contusions, were they consistent with injuries you would see if someone was struck with a bat?
Yes, so these 4 that we have demonstrated would be consistent with the bat. This one up over the back of the right shoulder could have been from a bat or it could have been from something else.
Can you speak to the amount of force necessary to create those injuries?
Yeah, so I would, as far as swinging a bat, I would put this in the moderate category. There were no associated rib fractures with any of these, but it was enough to leave a significant bruise.
Right. Is there anything else documented in these 2 photos relevant to your findings that we have not discussed?
On the right photo is, again, it's another bruise, so that would be an impact with an instrument.
All right. Is it potentially caused by a baseball bat?
Yes.
Going to the next slide.
Thank you.
We're going clockwise, starting from the upper left. We have exhibits 7-98, 7-94, 7-96, and 7-97. And Doctor, what have you documented in these photos?
So these are of the upper right extremity, so from the elbow down to the tip of the hand. And the first one on the left, you can see there's, again, that plus sign injury. So this would be from a stab wound with a Phillips screwdriver. The next is the back of the right hand and right wrist. Again, all of these, there are 4 demonstrated here, again, are consistent with that Phillips screwdriver. The one at the base of the thumb here, that actually went all the way through the hand. It came out the palm. And then, in addition to those screwdriver injuries, we also have sharp force injuries. So we talked about perhaps incised wounds. We have one here between the webbing of the index and middle finger. And then we also have a through and through stab wound going through that webbing between the thumb and index finger.
So there are 2 separate through and through wounds?
Correct.
For the stab and incision wounds we see here, are those consistent with the knife that we showed you earlier this morning?
Yes.
For the Phillips head screwdriver injuries we've seen all the way up to here, are they all consistent with the screwdriver we showed you this morning?
Yes.
And can you speak to the amount of force necessary to create the injuries we see in these photos, please?
Yes, I think probably the most severe and the most significant and severe amount of force that would need to be would be this injury at the base of the thumb, in that it had to go through 2 layers of skin as well as tendons, which are the next most resistant. The injuries to the incised wound here would be similar to the force that you cut yourself, cutting vegetables would be that type of force.
For the screwdriver injury that went through and through, was it the fact that it's a screwdriver indicating that more force would have been necessary to create that through and through wound versus a sharp item doing it?
Yes.
Do any of these wounds appear to be defensive wounds?
So defensive wounds has a definition and a meaning to a forensic pathologist. We use the term defensive wounds as if you see wounds on the hands or the forearms in the same class of injuries that are seen in other vital areas of the body. We use the term defensive terms, and the assumption is that the person would ward off an attack by holding up their hands or forearms.
Right. And just looking at the body, you can't say for sure how those wounds were caused, whether it was holding off an attacker versus something else.
Correct.
Is there anything else in the photos on the slide that was relevant to your findings we have not discussed yet?
No.
The next slide has exhibits 7-37 and 7-93. And what have you documented in these photos?
So this is the picture on the left is the back of the left hand, and there's a contusion, so that would be a bruise. And then on the photo on the right, there are incised wounds, so they're just barely going through the skin, and that would be consistent with a knife or the tip of a knife, the edge of a knife or the tip of a knife causing those injuries.
I believe this is the last of our photos. Were there any other injuries that were significant to your findings that weren't documented in the photos we've looked at so far?
No.
All right. Doctor, you mentioned earlier that you took samples for toxicology.
Yes.
All right. Can you tell us what you did for toxicological testing?
Yes, so we have choices of different panels to do. So I did what's called a drugs of abuse or basic panel.
All right. And I assume you took a sample of Taylor's blood for that?
Yes.
Was that similar to the one you took for getting a DNA profile for Taylor?
Yes.
So took a syringe from internal blood and collected it.
Yes.
And what did you do with that blood sample?
So we package it, and then it goes to a lab in Pennsylvania. It's a commercial forensic lab that's accredited in doing forensic toxicology testing.
And did they ultimately send you testing results from
Yes.
toxicology?
Yes.
Did you prepare a slide here at the end that kind of summarizes and categorizes the injuries you found during your autopsy of Taylor?
Yes.
Can you back up? Okay, would you please walk us through sort of the overall injuries that you found at autopsy?
Yeah, so just to summarize everything that we looked at, and so you get some idea of the distribution of the injuries and the types of injuries. Again, there were three basic types of injuries. There was blunt force, so this would cause a bruise or contusion, a laceration, and an abrasion. And then there were two different sharp force injuries. There's one that was caused by a knife and the other by a screwdriver. So in review, I found 15 lacerations or tears, one abrasion and one contusion on the head.
And if we can, again, abrasion be a scrape,
It'd be like a scrape, like a skinned knee on the playground.
and contusion's a bruise?
Correct, a contusion is a bruise.
Okay, please continue.
Yep, and then on the back, there was one abrasion. We didn't see a picture of that, but it was up kind of on the curve of the upper left shoulder. And then 6 contusions, 4 of which we were able to see in the photo. And then the upper extremities, there were 4 contusions, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And then the sharp force, so this would be a knife type injuries. There were 6 on the neck. Those were all on the back and sides of the neck. 7 torso is a term that we use anything between the neck and the lower pelvis, so mostly on the back and mid-chest level. 2 on the left hand, which were those little superficial incised wounds, and then 2 on the right hand, that one was that through and through and another cut wound. And then the screwdriver wounds, there was a total of 23 wounds there. They involved mostly the back of the head, underneath in the neck, 6 on the torso, most concentrated over around the right upper back, and then 5 involving the forearm and the right hand.
Doctor, after performing the autopsy and reviewing everything you had, were you able to form an opinion as to the cause of Taylor's death?
Yes.
What was that opinion?
It was multiple blunt and sharp force injuries.
And were you able to, what was the basis for that opinion?
My autopsy findings.
And after performing the autopsy, did you form an opinion as to the manner of death?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Homicide.
As opposed to, again, what would the other options be?
Natural, accident, suicide, and undetermined.
And what does homicide mean?
Homicide means death at the hands of another.
Did you prepare a report that summarized your observations, findings, and opinions from your autopsy of Taylor Escontrias?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Klein, I've just handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 13 for identification purposes. Is that your autopsy report?
Yes, it is.
And does it have the toxicology results attached to the back?
Yes, it does.
And does Exhibit 13 fairly and accurately reflect your observations, findings, and opinions from your autopsy?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 13.
No objection, states 13, Your Honor.
Exhibit 13 will be admitted.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Puentes?
Good afternoon, Dr. Klein.
Good afternoon.
I think it's probably easier just to kind of work through your report. I'm not going to go line by line. But the first page I think is probably very useful in this endeavor just because it kind of highlights your findings kind of in a summarized fashion. And before I get to those, I just want to ask, you had an opportunity to review some of her medical records, is that correct?
Yes, we do get medical records.
Okay. In either an evaluation or a review of her medical records, or just from sort of an assessment of her hands, were you able to tell which hand dominant she was?
No.
Okay. I didn't know if sometimes from like wear and tear, sort of normal use, you might be able to identify those things, and it sounds like you cannot.
No.
All right. Now, under category, it looks like Roman numeral I, on your report again, the first page, you identify some blunt force injuries, and category A is lacerations of the scalp, and we've already talked about those, and you explained how that could be either a cut or it could be a tear, is that correct?
Yeah, cut I usually say with a sharp force, like a knife, and a laceration would be a tear from a blunt force.
Okay. And you stated that a blunt force could be something consistent with a baseball bat, is that correct?
Yes.
But I think you testified it could also be consistent with, for example, a fall from standing, is that
Yes.
correct? So when you say terms like consistent with, you're not saying that's a definitive cause or mechanism, you're saying it's similar enough, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, with respect to all of the injuries that you testified were consistent or similar to the mechanism being a baseball bat, did any of those come with corresponding fractures?
No.
Okay. So the force you testified was substantial enough to break the skin, but not substantial enough to fracture the underlying bony prominences.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, the only exception, I'm sorry I misspoke, the only fracture that we had was in the mandible. So there was that bruise that's on the chin, and there was the bruising that we saw inside the mouth. Those were the only wounds that were associated with fractures of bones. But all the rest of the head and the ribs were all without associated fractures.
And there's, you'll agree, I assume, very little tissue between sort of the external skin and the skull itself. Is that correct?
Yes,
So there's not a lot of padding there. Is that right?
correct.
Okay. Now, with respect to that chin fracture, I believe if I heard your testimony correctly during direct, you said that that too could be caused from a fall. Is that correct?
It's possible.
So say, just hypothetically speaking, if a person were standing and either rendered unconscious or had a syncopal episode of some sort, they could fall, causing that injury. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just to, I guess, to make sure that the jury's familiar, what is a syncopal episode?
So it was just basically loss of consciousness.
The injuries that you described as being, again, consistent with a knife, I think specifically consistent with the knife that was admitted by the state earlier, are you saying it is that exact knife, or it's simply sufficiently similar?
Sufficiently similar.
Okay. And can you tell whether or not a straight blade or a serrated blade caused that injury?
If it's just a simple in and out, no. The only way to tell a serrated blade is if it's scraped along the surface. So I've had cases where it was a serrated blade and it looked indistinguishable from a smooth edge blade.
Okay, so a different knife with a different blade would essentially look the same to you?
Yes.
Now, on page 10 of 11 of your report, I'll give you a moment to get to it. You assessed this patient's liver, correct?
Yes.
And what were your findings?
She had what's called steatosis, so it's fatty liver, and I categorized it as severe fatty change.
And what type of, I guess, lifestyle choices could cause this type of, disorder?
Yeah, the most common cause of fatty liver is from alcohol, chronic alcohol dependency.
So someone who's just a occasional drinker would not necessarily have a liver in this condition, is that correct?
Usually you get some fatty liver, but the severe is usually associated with more chronic use of alcohol.
And as part of your autopsy, you sent out you sent out for toxicology, is that correct?
Yes.
You included those results in your report, is that correct?
Yes.
And what were the findings of the the toxicology as it relates to alcohol?
Yeah, so there were two specimens that were measured. One was blood and the other was the vitreous fluid, and alcohol was detected in both those specimens.
Did they give different results?
Yes.
Okay, and how, like, what is the explanation for the difference?
So they're different components. So there's the blood, and then there's the fluid in the eyes, and so there's tends to be about a 20 to 30 minute delay in the different phases of absorption and metabolism of any drugs, including alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, it's absorbed into the blood, and then over time that eventually becomes absorbed in the vitreous fluid, which is the fluid in the eyes. So during the absorption phase, the blood is going to be higher than the vitreous fluid. Then when you go in the metabolism phase, the vitreous fluid is going to be higher and the blood is going to be lower until eventually all of them reduce to zero.
Now, is it correct, or I guess is it fair to assume that when a person is deceased that they stop metabolizing alcohol?
They do stop metabolizing alcohol, depending on how long the person has died and what the conditions. Sometimes alcohol can go up after death.
And what is the time frame for that, if you know?
It really varies, and I can't give you a definite reproducible number, but usually people start to decompose when you see a significant, so you'd see some evidence of decomposition. I didn't see any evidence of significant decomposition in this case.
So your assumption is it should be relatively static from the point that she deceased?
Right, it would be close to what it was when she died.
Okay. And the number in the report is indicative of 0.338 blood alcohol content?
Yes.
Do you happen to know whether that's a high or a low blood alcohol?
That would be considered high.
What types of sort of, I guess, symptoms or observations of the human condition would you see in a person who has a level that high?
Yeah, so to the outside observer, it would depend on a person's experience and tolerance that they have with alcohol. In some people, this could lead to actually unconsciousness, to being having the outward appearance of being severely intoxicated. In other people that have high tolerance, it might take more directed testing, like having them do coordination tests to see the effects of that alcohol level.
Sorry, doctor, just bear with me for a moment, please. Can you explain, if you know, why does alcohol impair you? Like, what are the direct effects internally that cause you to be an altered person while intoxicated?
So I don't know the neurochemistry that's involved, like why it causes the impairment of judgment, disinhibition, and things like that. I am aware of the physiology. I'm most concerned about cause and manner of death. So the things in alcohol that cause death is usually respiratory depression, so decreasing the drive to breathe.
Would you agree, though, at least that alcohol, it does something to impact your brain? Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is that, if you know?
Multiple areas. In the psychological effects, I'm not familiar with. The physiological effects, though, it does actually affect the stimulation for breathing.
Okay. Are you familiar with the term blackout?
Yes.
Are you medically familiar or just kind of used to the common use of that term?
I'm used to the common term.
Okay. So you wouldn't know sort of the medical term associated with that phenomenon? Okay. Your Honor, it may appear a little herky-jerky at this time, but I would move to admit Defendant's Exhibit S, which I understand we had an agreement about, so I would move to admit that now.
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit S will be admitted.
Permission to publish just 2 pages of that report. This is the defendant's medical records, to be clear. He was evaluated by the hospital. We saw that in the videos that have already been offered. I'm just going to publish 2 pages, but the entire contents are located on Defense Exhibit S. It is very cluttered up here. Can I still use this Elmo in the condition it's in? Thank you. Doctor, I'm going to show you a portion of a lab report. I fully understand you did not see this before. You have not evaluated this patient, but you are a physician. I assume have read lab reports before, so I'm going to assume you can answer these questions. There's 2 tests that were conducted here. ALT and AST are significant to my question. Can you tell the jury what those are?
Those are both liver function tests, so when they're elevated, that indicates some liver disease.
Okay, and are they, I guess, a little elevated or a lot elevated? Can you tell?
Yeah, I've seen them higher, but these are high.
Okay. And this would be indicative, again, of alcoholism, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I want to show you one other page. Right here, near the middle, it's kind of hard to see, but it reads toxicology here. It says ALC, that's indicative of an ethanol alcohol result, correct?
Yes,
And to confirm, ethanol is just drinking alcohol, correct?
correct.
And what is the drinking alcohol number here?
So 316, and this is, the units are milligrams per deciliter. We use blood alcohol concentrate so this would be 0.316, what we would think of in legal terms.
Right, so you would not change the number, you'd simply move the decimal over 3 spaces.
Correct.
Okay. And then while I'm up here, I want to ask you about State's Exhibit 35-6. This was already previously admitted. Again, this is not an individual that you've inspected. I'm sure you've never seen this photograph before. But there is a laceration there in that image. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so, a laceration or a deep abrasion.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just tell you, for purposes of the record, because it's already been testified to, it is a laceration. Can you tell sort of where that's located on the body? I understand this individual's laying down, so it may change a little bit your view.
It appears to me that this is in the lower left abdomen.
Okay. Is that just, I guess, to the left as you're looking at the image? That would be his leg, correct?
Yes, right here, I assume, given that these are EKG patches, usually on the chest, that this would be the leg, and this would be the left lower abdomen area.
So if you took a line directly straight up in this image, what would be located there? I'm staying straight to the top of the television.
Oh, straight,
Yep.
that would be towards the center, so his pelvic and genitalia would be there, his umbilicus or belly button would probably be right in this area.
So with respect to that area, what structures would be found underneath that injury?
This left, so you'd have the hip right here, there might be some intestines right in this area. If you go deep enough, it might get into the kidney area.
Is there any vasculature there?
There is, so in right here, there's the iliac and femoral veins and arteries.
The femoral vein, a lot like the jugular vein, carries a tremendous amount of blood back to the heart, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's an area that would bleed in some cases, I guess rather aggressively.
Yes.
Okay. Is that a painful area?
Yes, there's a lot of nerve endings in that area and that could generate pain if there's any injury to it.
Sure. I just want to circle back. There was obviously already some discussion about manner of death, so I won't really kind of bemoan the issue here. But you said, I believe your testimony was that these are for vital statistics. Is that correct?
Correct.
What does that mean?
So vital statistics is what keeps track of birth records and death records. And so my main purpose for manner of death is to put the deaths that I'm responsible for in one of these categories.
Okay. And this is, just to be clear, not a legal finding, correct?
Correct.
You're not delving into issues of intent. You're simply indicating that this, it is your medical belief that this was caused by another person. Is that correct?
Correct.
And just to go back through some of the, I guess, the subcategories, natural would be something like a heart attack.
Yes.
All right. Accident would be vehicular in nature generally, or is there some other type of accident?
Yeah, that would be motor vehicle accidents and accidental overdose would be examples of accidents.
Okay, suicide is self-explanatory. Undetermined just means you can't definitively place it in one of these categories. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for your time, Doctor.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, going back to your discussion of that photo that you hadn't seen before, 35-6, and Mr. Puentes asked you if there's what's inside the body, I guess, on the inside of where that laceration was, and you mentioned, I believe, femoral veins and arteries.
Yes.
If someone gets, for example, stabbed in that location and it cut the femoral vein or artery, would that be a life-threatening injury?
Yes.
And is that because the person would simply bleed out?
Yes.
How long would it take typically for someone with a cut in that area that sliced out the femoral vein or artery to bleed out to the point that it would be life-threatening?
Right. It can vary from minutes to sometimes hours. And it really depends on the person, their other health conditions, and its location.
Right. If someone had been stabbed and is in that area and had a cut femoral vein or artery, is that something that could be treated by applying 5 sutures on the skin to close the wound?
So if you, particularly the artery, which is high pressure, if that were injured by a stabbing, say, you'd probably need to have some sort of surgery to go and actually repair that to prevent bleeding.
And back to the discussion about blood alcohol levels and tolerances, is it my understanding that if you took a chronic alcoholic and an inexperienced drinker and had them both consume alcohol that brought them to the same BAC level, the same amount of alcohol in their system, would you expect them to be able to, I guess, function in everyday terms differently?
Yeah, I think it'd be much more likely that the person who has a tolerance to alcohol, that they could be able to perform functions that someone who did not have a tolerance to be able to, and that even death could occur in one individual and not really affect that level in an individual who had tolerance.
So as someone who's a chronic alcoholic, you consume enough alcohol that if an inexperienced drinker did it, the inexperienced drinker would be killed by it from alcohol poisoning?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
No recross, Your Honor.
You may sit down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State has its next witness.
May we approach for a brief moment?
You may. Mr. Larson.
Your Honor, the state calls Ethan Rolling.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Please have a seat. You may proceed, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you state and spell your name for the record?
Ethan Rolling, R-O-L-I-G.
And what is your occupation?
I'm currently a deputy sheriff with the Scott County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, back in March of 2024, what was your occupation?
I was a detective with the Scott County Sheriff's Office.
And so I assume you're a you're a deputy or law enforcement officer with the Sheriff's Office.
Correct.
How long have you been a sheriff or with the Sheriff's Office?
I started in the jail in 2016. I went to patrol in 2019, detective in 21, and then just recently in January went back to patrol.
Okay, and what was you? Did you have a role in the Christopher Behal, Taylor Escamprius investigation?
Yes,
What was your role in that investigation?
lead investigator.
Okay, and we're going to hear more from you later on, probably tomorrow. I want to direct your attention to a narrow window for purposes of this discussion. As part of that role, did you collect any swabs from Mr. Behal?
Yes,
And what date did you collect those swabs?
it would have been March 14th, the same date of the interview and the beginning of the investigation.
And what swabs did you take?
I got 2 buccal swabs and a swab off of the knuckles of the suspect.
Okay, and buccal isn't, I think, a normal word that most people use. What is a buccal swab?
It's a swab that you get from the inside of the cheek of an individual to get a known DNA sample.
And you just got to my next question, but is that the purpose for getting that buccal swab?
Yes.
And can you walk us through how you get a buccal swab?
Essentially, you just take a sterilized cotton Q-tip and you rub it on the inside of the cheek of the individual for about 30 seconds to 60 seconds, just to make sure that you have a good sample.
And is that what you did in this case?
Yes.
And then what did you do with the swab itself after getting the sample?
After the sample's been collected, I placed them in a sterile box that are one-time use. They were sealed and eventually sent to the Iowa DCI for testing.
And you mentioned you also got a swab on from a knuckle.
Yes.
Can you describe how you obtained that swab?
Much in the same manner, I just rubbed the swab on the knuckles.
And then what did you do with that swab once you were done collecting the sample?
Same thing, packaged it, and then eventually it was sent to the Iowa DCI.
What was the purpose for sending both of those swabs to the DCI lab?
For the buccal swabs, it was to develop a known DNA sample for Mr. Behal to be compared against any other samples that we had throughout the case. For the swab of the knuckles, when I had come in contact with the defendant, he had some potentially blood on the knuckles, and I wanted to see whether it was his or somebody else's.
Okay, and do you remember which hand that sample was taken from?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Handing Deputy Rolling, must be marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 69 and States Exhibit 70. You don't want to review those.
Okay,
Do you recognize what those are, Deputy Rolling?
I do.
And what are they?
These would be the samples that we were just talking about.
Okay, and would you have initially placed the sample into this bag?
Yes,
And you seal the bag when you do that?
yes.
And can you tell if the initial seal that you put on has been broken?
They have not.
Can you tell if the envelope's been opened?
They appear to have been opened from the other end from the one that I sealed.
Okay, and have those new openings that you did not put there, have they been sealed?
They have.
And are those, is that how you'd expect to see it if it was sent to the DCI and the DCI lab tested it?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state moves to introduce exhibits 69 and 70.
No objection, 69 or 70, Your Honor.
69 and 70 will be admitted.
No further questions of this witness at this time, but the state does intend to recall Deputy Rowling.
No questions at this particular moment, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Thanks, sir.
State may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Stanton Freelinger. Let me try that again. The state calls Stanton Freelinger.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat there. You may proceed, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, would you please introduce yourself to the jury and tell us how you spell your name?
My name is Stanton Freelinger. My first name is spelled Stanton, last name Freilinger.
Would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a criminalist in the DNA section of the State Crime Laboratory.
And what does a criminalist do?
A criminalist examines evidence that has been submitted from various crime scenes, examines that evidence looking for various body fluids, and I attempt to develop DNA profiles and compare to known individuals.
And as a criminalist, you say you specialize in DNA?
Yes.
Would you please tell the jury about your education and training to be a DCI criminalist, and in particular, one who works in the area of DNA?
I received my bachelor's degree in biology from Iowa State University, and then I received an over 1 year on-the-job training program before I became a criminalist.
And do you currently work for the Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory here in Iowa?
Yes.
How long have you worked at the DCI lab?
I've worked there for over 5 years.
And essentially, you're at the lab, law enforcement sends stuff to you to test regarding DNA.
Yes.
What happens, I want to talk a bit about the lab's procedures and security to make sure items aren't tampered with or altered. What happens to an item when it arrives at the DCI lab?
When it arrives at the laboratory, we have evidence technicians who scan the evidence in with various barcode labels and then secure that evidence with evidence tape, make sure it's initialed and dated, and put into a secure storage vault until I request that evidence, and then I physically pick that evidence up and return it to our secure DNA section.
I assume that that vault has limited access.
Yes, it requires key card access, and the whole building itself is secured as well.
Do items that are submitted to the lab get assigned a number?
Yes.
And does that number necessarily correspond to the evidence number a law enforcement agency would assign to it?
The law enforcement agency number might not match the DCI number. It might match just depending on what number they have put in.
Okay. As part of your work, you mentioned DNA. Do you also test items, or as part of your DNA work, do you test items for the presence of blood?
Yes.
Okay, how do you do that?
We have a test, they are known as phenolphthalein and tetramethylbenzidine. P and TMB are common abbreviations. But these are color-changing tests that when chemicals are put on the assumed presence of blood and added hydrogen peroxide, one will change to a pink color and the other will change to a blue color.
Why do you use two different chemicals?
Both chemicals have different false positives that can change in the presence of those substances. And the two substances have different false positives. So if both turn to a pink and blue color, we can assume that there's a strong possibility that there's blood present.
And you're not, am I correct in understanding that you're not aware of any chemical or substance that would create a false positive with both tests?
Based upon my training and literature that I've read, the false positives are different between the two tests.
Let's talk about DNA then. Could you please tell us what is DNA?
DNA is an acronym. It stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's in every cell in the human body that, except for red blood cells. These cells contain DNA that is the building block of life and is unique to all individuals except for identical twins. So this DNA is what essentially makes you unique from any other person.
So if Mr. Larson were my identical twin, we would have the same DNA?
Yes.
And since we're not related, we get different DNA?
Yes.
What are the sources of DNA? Where can you find DNA? You mentioned in cells, but like what kind of cells, what kind of body parts or fluids?
Yes, and one example is blood. Blood has red blood cells and white blood cells. The white blood cells contain DNA. Skin cells, sperm cells, those are the most common sources of DNA.
And would you expect a person's DNA to be the same if it came from a white blood cell versus a skin cell versus, for example, seminal fluid?
Yes.
Okay. How do you test for the presence of DNA on an item that gets submitted to the lab?
So the body fluids themselves we screen for and test the presence of. However, in order to see if there's DNA present, the DNA must be extracted from the cells on the evidence, and then through a process called quantitation, we determine the amount of DNA that is present. And then through amplifying that DNA to make millions of copies, we have an instrument that can read that DNA profile and develop it into like a picture or a graph that we can interpret.
And what do you mean by a DNA profile?
So a DNA profile is a series of peaks on a graph with numbers that are assigned to them, depending on the size of the lengths of DNA fragments. So you can think of it as like a jigsaw puzzle, and each person has a unique jigsaw puzzle. Individual pieces of that puzzle add up to make a single DNA profile or a picture.
And how do you compare two DNA sources? So let's say you got someone's blood and you get a DNA profile from that, and then you're asked to look at, say, a blood stain on an item to see if they match. How do you do that?
When a known sample is submitted, whether it be from blood or the swab from the inside of the cheek, a known DNA profile is developed in the process that was discussed before, in the same way as developing an evidence profile. By essentially looking at those two graphs or puzzles, we can compare them and visually see if they match one another.
And as part of that process, are you able to, I guess, determine the probability of the match? Am I using that terminology right?
Yes, we use a computer-based system that has a database of DNA fragments and their presence in different populations. So these are all multiplied together to create an overall probability that that profile is seen in a population of unrelated individuals.
As part of your work as a DNA criminalist, do you compare DNA sources and then reach conclusions about the strength of the match based on how likely you would see that those profiles to be present in unrelated people in the general population?
Yes, probabilities are provided with our statistical reporting.
Does the DCI lab have submission guidelines that would limit the number of items that are tested in a case?
Depending on the type of case, we do try to limit the amount of items that are submitted, at least on the first round of testing, based upon our limitations and resources available.
All right, as part of your duties with the DCI lab, did you receive items related to a death investigation involving Christopher Behal?
Yes.
And were you asked to test certain items for the presence of blood?
Yes.
And were you asked to compare potential DNA on various items to known samples from individuals?
Yes.
And were you provided a known sample for Christopher Behal?
Yes, I was.
And were you provided a known sample for Taylor Escontrias?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I apologize, Your Honor. Our court attendant did a fabulous job of getting this organized earlier, and chaos has reigned since, but I found what I needed. Mr. Stringlinger, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 69 and 72. Do you recognize 69 and 72?
Yes, I do.
Hey, what is Exhibit 69?
Exhibit 69 are the known buccal swabs of Christopher Behal.
Right, and were those submitted to the DCI lab?
Yes.
And did you do something with them?
Yes, I would have opened the evidence, I would have cut it open with a razor blade and examined the swabs and then cut from them into a test tube.
Did 69 arrive to you, I guess, in a sealed, unopened condition?
Yes.
And was there any sign that 69 had been tampered with before you started working with it?
No.
And when you were done working with the swabs inside 69, what did you do with it?
I resealed the evidence with evidence tape and put my initials and the date of examination on the evidence.
This Exhibit 69 appeared to be in the same condition it was when you were done working with it.
Yes, it still has my initials and evidence tape sealed.
And were you able to develop a DNA sample from, or excuse me, a DNA profile from Mr. Behal's buccal swabs?
Yes.
All right. And were you able to use that to compare it to other items to see if his DNA was present on other items?
Yes.
All right. Turning to Exhibit 72, do you recognize that?
Yes. This is a known blood stain card from Taylor Escontrias.
And when you received it, was it in a sealed and unaltered condition?
Yes.
And did you open it up?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do with the contents of Exhibit 72?
In this case, I would have taken a small cutting of the blood stain, again with a razor blade, and put it into a test tube for further testing.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile for Taylor Escontrias?
Yes.
And were you able to use that profile to determine whether her DNA was found on other items or in other items submitted for you for analysis?
Yes, I was.
And what did you do with item 72 when you were done developing Taylor's DNA profile?
I put the evidence back into the envelope and sealed it with evidence tape and properly labeled it.
All right. Does items or Exhibit 72 appear to be in the same condition it was when you were done with it?
Yes, it does.
As part of your work in connection with this case, did you work to analyze a knife that was submitted to the DCI lab?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I have handed you State's Exhibit 29. Is that the knife that was submitted to the lab for you to perform testing on?
Yes.
All right, and what did you do with the knife?
For the knife, I would have swabbed the handle of the knife for touch DNA, and then screened the blade of the knife for the possibility of blood, and then ran a sample from the blade of the knife.
Okay. Could you explain what touch DNA is, please?
So touch DNA would be DNA from skin cells from anyone that touched an item of evidence.
So if I pick up a pen, I could potentially leave skin cells behind?
There's a possibility, yes.
Okay. Were you able to find any DNA on the swabs you took from the handle?
The handle of the knife swabs were too weak for further interpretation.
And what does too weak mean in this context?
When a DNA profile is developed, if it does not meet a certain strength threshold, it cannot be analyzed per our standard operating procedures.
Did you screen the knife for the presence of blood?
Yes, I did.
Did you detect the presence of blood on the knife?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on one area of the knife.
Do you recall where on the knife that area was located?
That would have been the blade of the knife.
And were you able to take a swab from that area?
Yes.
And were you able to detect DNA in that swabbed area?
Yes, the DNA profile developed from the swabs of the blade of the knife matched the known DNA profile of Taylor S. Contrius.
And we talked a little bit about probabilities. What was the strength of the comparison to Taylor's DNA?
The probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
What is an octillion?
So octillion would be 1,000 followed by 24 zeros.
As part of your work in this case, did you do some testing on a red armor under t-shirt?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 31. Do you recognize Exhibit 31?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
That is labeled as the red Under Armour t-shirt.
All right. When that, is that the red Under Armour t-shirt that you tested?
Yes, it has my initials and date on the packaging.
And when you received that, did it appear to be sealed and untampered with?
Yes, it was sealed.
All right. And what did you do to the shirt that's inside Exhibit 31?
For the shirt, I screened for the presence of blood on 2 areas.
And did you find the presence of blood
Yes, I did.
in both areas?
Yes, on the front left stomach area of the shirt and the left back area of the shirt.
For the left stomach area, were you able to develop a DNA profile?
Yes, I was.
And were you able to compare it to Christopher Behal's DNA?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
Cutting from the left stomach area of the shirt matched the DNA profile of Christopher Behal, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 630 octillion.
And did you get a DNA profile from the left back area?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find when you compared that to Mr. Behal's DNA?
I believe that was the same as the left stomach cutting.
And the same strength of comparison?
Yes.
Were you asked to do some testing on a pair of white and gray starter shorts?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 32. Do you recognize Exhibit 32?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 32?
Those are white and gray starter shorts.
And were those the starter shorts you were asked to test in connection with this case?
Yes.
Did those shorts arrive in the packaging you have there in a sealed and unaltered condition?
Yes.
And what did you do to the shorts?
The shorts, similar to the shirt, I screened 2 areas for the presence of blood.
And did you find the presence of blood in both areas?
Yes.
And where were those 2 areas located on the shorts?
The first area of the shorts was the bottom right leg area of the shorts.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that area?
Yes.
And what did you find when you compared that DNA to other known samples?
The DNA profile developed from the bottom right leg area of the shorts matched the DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias.
With what level of strength of comparison?
Again, the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile from the other area on the short that tested positive for blood?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find when you tested that area for DNA?
This area indicated the mixture of 2 individuals, and the major profile matched the known DNA profile of Christopher Behal with a probability of 1 in 630 octillion.
You referenced Mr. Behal as being the major contributor. How do you, I assume that means there's also a minor contributor?
Yes, there's another evidence of another individual present.
Does major mean there's more of Mr. Behal's DNA versus the other person's?
Yes.
And were you able to get enough of the minor contributor's DNA from the shorts to develop a profile for that source?
I could not make any further interpretations about the minor profile.
As part of your work with this case, or I guess maybe you shouldn't say for your work, but did the Scott County Sheriff's Office send an item of black clothing to the lab initially for testing?
Yes, there was an item labeled as black clothing.
And was that given an item number by the Sheriff's Office of 11?
Without looking at my report, I couldn't verify that for sure.
Would looking at your report help refresh your recollection?
Yes, it would.
Do you have your report in front of you?
I do have a copy in my binder.
Your Honor, may he refresh his recollection?
He may.
Please take a look and let us know when you've had a chance to look it over. And I would draw your attention to lab item number 4.
Yes, lab item 4 is listed as agency number 11.
And did you ultimately test that particular item?
No, I did not.
All right. Was that, I guess, we talked earlier about limitations on the lab, and at a first pass, sometimes decisions are made to only test some of the items for a case to meet the lab's limitations.
But yes, that's true.
And was this particular item excluded during that process?
Yes, it was.
All right. Did the Sheriff's Office also submit some pink clothing to the lab that was ultimately not tested?
Yes.
All right. Was a black and red screwdriver submitted to the lab for you to test?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
The hand you states Exhibit 25. Do you recognize Exhibit 25?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 25?
Exhibit 25 is a red and black screwdriver.
And is that the screwdriver you tested in connection with this case?
Yes, it is.
And did the black and red screwdriver arrive in a sealed and unaltered condition when you first saw it?
Yes.
And what did you do with the screwdriver?
First, I swabbed the grip of the screwdriver, again, to attempt to develop a profile from touch DNA.
And were you able to develop a profile?
No DNA profile was developed from the swabs of the grip of the screwdriver.
All right. Did you do any testing, I guess, maybe on the shaft or the tip of the screwdriver?
Yes, I screened one area of the metal end of the screwdriver.
And what did you screen it for?
Blood.
Did you detect the presence of blood on the metal in that area?
Yes, screening indicated the presence of blood on one area on the metal end of the screwdriver.
Did you attempt to extract a DNA profile from that blood area?
Yes.
And did you compare it to Taylor Escontrias' DNA?
Yes, the DNA profile developed from the swabs of the metal end of the screwdriver matched the DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
As part of your work in this case, did you test a metal baseball bat that was submitted to the DCI lab?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
hand you what's been marked as, is State's Exhibit 23. If you could please take a look in there. And do you recognize Exhibit 23 and the contents of that box?
Yes, I do.
And what's in there?
One aluminum baseball bat.
Is that the bat you tested in connection with this case?
Yes.
And what did you do to test, well, let me step that back. Did that box arrive to you in a sealed and unaltered condition?
Yes.
And what did you do with the bat inside Exhibit 23?
I screened for the presence of blood on 2 areas of the barrel of the bat.
And did you find the presence of blood?
Yes, screening indicated the presence of blood on the bottom of the barrel of the bat and the top of the barrel of the bat.
Were you able to extract DNA profiles from both of those areas of blood?
Yes.
And were you able to compare those, the DNA from the bat to Taylor S. Contreras?
Yes, the same DNA profile was developed from both areas of the bat, and that profile matched the known DNA profile of Taylor's Contreras, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
As part of your work in this case, did you, did the Scott County Sheriff's Office submit for you to test swabs taken from the right hand of Christopher Behal?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Is it all right if we put this under the bench?
Of course.
Avoid some chaos. Handed you State's Exhibit 70. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 70?
That'd be swabs from Christopher Behal's hand.
And did that envelope arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes, it did.
All right. And did it contain swabs?
Yes.
And what did you do with the swabs inside Exhibit 70?
I first screened those swabs for the presence of blood.
Did you find the presence of blood?
Yes, screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs.
And were you able to extract a DNA profile from the blood on the swabs?
Yes, the DNA profile developed from the swabs indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major individual matched the DNA profile of Taylor S. Contreras, and the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion, and the minor DNA profile was too weak for further interpretation.
What did you do with the contents of Exhibit 70 when you were finished testing those contents?
I put the swabs back into the box, sealed that box inside the envelope
And did you do anything to seal the envelope?
with evidence tape and my date and initials.
Does Exhibit 70, as you see it today, appear to be in the same condition as when you were finished with it?
Yes.
And then as part of the items sent to you, were you asked to analyze a blood swab taken next to a tent numbered 1?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you.
I have handed you Exhibit 56. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
And what is 56?
Blood swab from a tent labeled 10-1.
And did it arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes.
What did you do when you opened it, did you find swabs inside?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do with those swabs?
I screened them for the presence of blood.
Did you detect blood?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that blood?
Yes, the profile developed from the swabs matched the known DNA profile of Taylor S. Contreras, and the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
And when you were done working with that swab, you again package it back up and seal it?
Yes, I did.
And as we see Exhibit 56 today, is it in the same condition as when you were done with it?
Yes.
Were you asked to?
Mr. Mr. Jones, I think this is a good time for us to take our afternoon break. Ladies and gentlemen, I remind you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves, and please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. We'll be in adjournment for about 15 minutes or so.
All right, adjourn.
62 there.
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 62?
Swabs from tent 13B.
And when you opened it, did you find swabs inside?
Yes,
Did you test those swabs for the presence of blood?
I did.
What did you find?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood on the swabs?
Yes.
And did it match Taylor Escontrias?
Yes, the profile matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias.
To what degree of strength of comparison?
The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
And again, did you put the swabs back in the box and then seal it inside the envelope?
Yes, I did.
And does 62 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
Yes.
Do you have Exhibit 63?
Yes,
Do you recognize it?
I do.
What is Exhibit 63?
Swabs from tent 13C.
And did you find swabs inside?
I did.
Did you test them for the presence of blood?
Yes.
And what did you find?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood on the swabs?
Yes, I did.
And did that match the known sample of Taylor Escontrias?
Yes, the DNA profile developed matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias.
And with what strength of comparison?
The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
Do you have Exhibit 64?
Yes,
Do you recognize it?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 64?
It's labeled as swab from the front door handle.
Did you find swabs inside the envelope?
Yes,
And did 64 arrive to you in a sealed and untampered with condition?
yes,
Did you screen the swabs in 64 for the presence of blood?
yes,
And, did you find blood?
I did.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood on the swabs in Exhibit 64?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find when you compared the DNA to known samples?
The DNA profile indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
Were you able to match the minor contributor?
The minor factors were too weak for additional comparison.
When you're done, did you put the swabs back in the box and seal them in the envelope?
Yes,
And does 64 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
yes, it does.
And if we go back to 63, did 63 arrive to you sealed and in not tampered with condition?
Yes,
And does it appear now the way it did when you were done with it?
it does.
Do you have Exhibit 65?
Yes,
All right. Do you recognize it?
I do.
What is Exhibit 65?
These are swabs from the front door deadbolt.
And did you find swabs inside of it?
I did.
And jumping ahead of myself, did Exhibit 65 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes,
Did you screen the swabs inside Exhibit 65 for the presence of blood?
I did.
And did you find blood?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood on the swabs?
The DNA profile developed from the swabs of the deadbolt indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias. The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile for the minor contributor?
No, the minor contributor was too weak to make any determinations.
When you were done testing 65, did you put the swabs back in the box and reseal them in the envelope?
Yes,
And does 65 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
it does.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you.
Do you have State's Exhibit 66?
Yes,
Do you recognize it?
I do.
What is 66?
These are 7 sets of swabs from a cell phone.
Did Exhibit 66 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes, it did.
And did you find swabs inside 66?
Yes,
Did you perform any testing on them?
I did.
And did you test all of the swabs?
I did not.
Which ones did you not test?
I did not test swabs from the front top and front bottom of the phone, or the front, back top and back bottom of the phone.
Did you test other swabs for the presence of blood?
Yes.
Which swabs did you test for blood?
The swabs from the front middle of the phone, the back middle of the phone, and the power button.
And did you find blood in those areas?
Yes, screening indicated the presence of blood on all 3 sets of swabs.
Were you able to develop DNA profiles?
Yes.
And were you able to match those profiles?
I was able to make determinations.
Okay, could you walk us through your determinations as to DNA matching with known profiles?
Yes, for these swabs from the front middle and back middle of the phone, the DNA profile matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion. And then on the swab of the power button, this indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. On the profile, the major contributor matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias. Again, this probability in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
Were you able to develop a DNA sample from the minor contributor from the power button swab?
And no, I was not.
Does that mean that someone other than Taylor Escontrias touched the power button, but you can't say who it was?
There's a possibility that somebody touched it.
Okay. Do you have, when you were done with the swabs from 66, did you repackage them and then seal the envelope?
Yes.
Does 66 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
Yes.
Do you have Exhibit 67?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize 67?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 67?
They are swabs from the Chevy Impala floor mat.
Did Exhibit 67 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes,
Did you perform testing on the swabs inside 67?
I did.
And what did you do with those swabs?
There were 3 different swabs inside the envelope. There was a control swab, a swab from a small stain, and a small swab from a large stain.
And did you test any of them for blood?
Testing was only performed on the swabs from the large stain.
Did the testing indicate the presence of blood in that large stain?
Yes, it did.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that blood stain?
Yes, the DNA profile developed from the swabs matched the known DNA profile of Christopher Behal, and the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 630 octillion.
When you were done with 67, did you return the swabs to the box and then reseal them in the envelope?
Yes,
And does Exhibit 67 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
yes, it does.
Do you have Exhibit 68?
Yes, I do.
And do you recognize it?
I do.
What is Exhibit 68?
Swabs from the Chevy Impala carpet.
Did Exhibit 68 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes,
Did you perform any testing on the swabs inside Exhibit 68?
I did.
And which swabs did you test?
The envelope contained swabs from the listed as a blood stain on the carpet, and then also a control swab.
Which of those, or did you test both?
Only on the swab from the carpet.
Did you test it for the presence of blood?
I did.
And did you find blood there?
Screening indicated the presence of blood.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood in the swab from Exhibit 68?
The DNA profile developed from the swabs indicated a mixture of 2 individuals. The profile of the major contributor matched the DNA profile of Christopher Behal, and the probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 630 octillion.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile for the minor contributor?
The minor additional factors were too weak for conclusive interpretation.
When you were done with your testing, did you return the swabs to the box and then reseal them in the envelope containing 68?
Yes,
Does Exhibit 68 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
it does.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you.
I've just handed you Exhibit 76. Do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is 76?
This is a sexual assault evidence collection kit.
Did that arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes,
Did you open the kit up?
I did.
And what's inside the kit generally?
The kit contains swabs from various body parts, oftentimes vaginal swabs, anal swabs, oral swabs, and then a known sample from the individual.
Just overall, for everything that was in the sexual assault kit, did you find any DNA that was not Taylor Escontrias's on any of those samples?
I did not find any DNA profiles that I could call foreign to Taylor Escontrias.
And, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may. You may.
Before we get to the three exhibits I just handed to you, was an item submitted to the DCI lab that was described as pulled scalp hair from autopsy?
Yes,
And did that have, was that item tested for DNA or blood?
I did not perform any examinations on those hairs.
And again, was that part of the concessions made for the lab screening standards for first pass on evidence?
In this case, known pulled scalp hairs are often submitted as an alternative to develop a known profile. So in this case, a known profile was already developed from the blood sample.
So basically, this was a backup and you didn't need it?
Yeah, it was not needed.
Okay. Do you have Exhibit 73?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 73?
Loose hairs from the right hand of Taylor Escontrias.
Did Exhibit 73 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes,
And did you find loose hairs inside Exhibit 73?
I did.
And did you perform any testing on those hairs?
Yes, I examined 2 of the hairs microscopically and determined that they have root ends that were suitable for for examination. So I sampled from those 2 hairs.
What is the significance of a hair having a root end for DNA testing?
For the DNA testing that is performed at our laboratory, the DNA comes from the root of the hair that is common when it's pulled out of a scalp, for example. There may be a tissue or skin stuck to that end of that hair. When hairs can fall out naturally, oftentimes there's not a root end that's examinable for our tests, and therefore we can't develop DNA profiles.
So other than the root, the hair doesn't contain at least testable DNA?
Not DNA that can be tested at our laboratory.
Okay. In this case, did you find 2 hairs that did have root ends present that were appropriate for DNA profiling?
Yes.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile from either root?
Yes, from the root of the first hair, a DNA profile was developed that was consistent with the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias.
And with what degree or what strength of certainty?
The probability of finding this profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 110 septillion.
Okay, what is a septillion?
Septillion would be 1,000 followed by 21 zeros.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the root of the second hair?
Yes, the root of the second hair, I was able to develop a profile that matched the known DNA profile of Taylor Escontrias, and the probability of finding that profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random would be less than 1 out of 5.8 octillion.
When you were done doing your testing with the loose hairs, did you reseal them in Exhibit 73?
Yes.
Does Exhibit 73 today appear the way it did when you were done with it?
Yes.
Do you have Exhibit 74?
Apologize. Yes, I do.
Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 74?
These are fingernail clippings and fingernail clippings and the fingernail clippers that were used on the left hand.
Does it, when you received Exhibit 74, was it in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes.
And when you opened it up, did you find nail clippings and nail clippers?
Yes.
Did you perform any testing on the nail clippers?
The clippers themselves, no.
And did you screen the clippings for the presence of blood?
Yes, I swabbed the 8 clippings from the nails that were included and screened those swabs for the presence of blood.
And did you find blood present on those clippings?
Screening indicated the presence of blood on the swabs of the nail clippings.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the blood?
Yes, no DNA factors foreign to Taylor Contreras were detected in the profile developed from the left hand fingernail clippings.
Does that mean that to the extent there was DNA in the clippings, they appeared to match Taylor and not someone else?
Yes, when samples are taken from an individual's body, such as fingernails or any body swabs, if there's no DNA that is foreign to them, it is referred to as nothing foreign to that individual.
When you were done with the materials in Exhibit 74, did you return them to the envelope and then reseal it?
Yes.
Does Exhibit 74 appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
Yes, it does.
Do you have Exhibit 75?
I do.
Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 75?
Exhibit 75 are the nail clippings and the clippers that were used on the right hand.
Did Exhibit 75 arrive to you in a sealed and not tampered with condition?
Yes.
And did you do any testing on the clippers in Exhibit 75?
No.
Did you detect or did you test for the presence of blood on the clippings in Exhibit 75?
Yes, I swabbed the 8 pieces of fingernail clippings and screened those swabs.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile from the swabs from the clippings?
Yes, screening indicated the presence of blood on those swabs, so when I tested them, there were no DNA factors foreign to Taylor Contreras on those swabs.
When you were done working with the materials in Exhibit 75, did you put them back in the envelope and reseal it?
Yes.
Does it appear today the way it did when you were done with it?
Yes, it does.
Does that conclude everything that you tested in connection with this case?
Yes.
Did you prepare a written report that summarized what you tested and what your findings were?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I've handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 11 for identification purposes. Do you recognize State's 11?
Yes.
And what is it?
This is a copy of my DNA report.
And does it fairly and accurately document your findings and conclusions from your work testing items in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move to admit State's Exhibit 11.
Your Honor, I agree this. Big sidebar on this.
defense?
No objection with the comments, etc.
Exhibit 11 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Mr. Eagle,
No questions, Your Honor.
you may step down.
Thank you.
State wish to call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Deputy Ethan Rowling.
Sir, I'll go ahead and swear you in once again, since you're taking the stand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat. You may proceed, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you state your name?
Ethan Rowling.
And you've already talked a little bit about what you do, but I just want to start at the top again. What is your current position?
Currently a deputy for the Scott County Sheriff's Office.
And I think you said you're previously a detective.
Yes,
And how long have you been with the Scott County Sheriff's Office?
since 2016.
And can you walk us through your roles since 2016?
In 2016, I started as a correctional officer in the jail. In 2019, I was temporarily promoted to sergeant within the jail. Then I transferred out to patrol, attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy. Then I was a patrol deputy till 2021, where I became a detective, and then recently transferred back out to patrol.
And I assume you're a certified peace officer?
Yes.
How long have you been a certified peace officer?
I was previously a peace officer within the military. I was a military police officer from 2011 to 2013, stationed in Fort Hood, Texas. And then in 2019, I attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy as well.
Currently in your role as deputy, do you have any additional duties beyond some other deputies?
Currently, I hold multiple specialties. I'm a field training officer, drone pilot. I'm a crisis negotiator on our crisis hostage negotiator team.
And what's a field training officer?
Field training officer is in charge of training oncoming individuals that are hired by our department to be deputies.
And in your current position as deputy, what do your general duties include?
Responding to calls, accidents, doing traffic stops, regular law enforcement functions.
And when you were a detective, generally speaking, what were your duties?
My primary area of focus was internet crimes against children and digital forensics, as well as any other major crimes that came through.
And in general terms, what's the difference between a deputy and a detective?
It's a lateral position. Deputy normally holds more responsibility, investigating cases and following up on them, whereas deputies ride around in a squad car and perform that function in the sheriff's office.
Do you have any specialized training applicable to your former position as a detective?
Yes.
And can you tell us what that is?
I've attended multiple trainings for various investigative capabilities, to include interview and interrogation, as well as a multitude of specific trainings for digital forensics.
And other than your jurisdiction here in the state of Iowa, do you have authority over any other jurisdictions?
Yes.
And can you explain in what manner?
I was also sworn as a task force officer for the United States Secret Service. In that function, it essentially allowed me to bring cases before the federal court system and follow them were they to cross state lines, which is very common for internet crimes against children cases.
And because of that role, do you have any training that you otherwise would not have available to you as a just a regular Scott County detective?
Yes.
And can you explain what that training is?
The Secret Service provides training for local law enforcement if they agree to be task force partners. Part of that training is held at the National Computer Forensics Institute in Hoover, Alabama, where much of my training came from.
And what type of training did you receive in Hoover, Alabama?
I've attended multiple trainings. One of them is the Basic Computer Evidence Recovery Training, which is BCERT for short. It's a 5-week-long training course where it's for 5 weeks straight, you're down there. And they pretty much teach you everything from the ground level up for digital forensics as it relates to computers. I've also attended their mobile device examiner training, which is essentially the same thing, but for phones, tablets, items like that. That's a 3-week-long course. I've also attended vehicle forensics course there and open source intelligence gathering course there.
You use the term digital forensics. Can you explain what is meant by that?
Sure. Digital forensics is the science of extracting data from electronic devices and then examining that data as well. So when that data is extracted from a device, at its very raw, most base form, it's a bunch of ones and zeros. The skill that comes in with a digital forensics analyst is being able to know how to process that data and interpret it into a readable format for humans.
And I assume you use that more as a detective in your prior role than as a deputy today, is that correct?
Yes, I still work some cases that are holding over. Like I said previously, I just recently transferred out, so I still do have some active cases. But yes, I used it far more in a daily capacity back then.
And how do you utilize this training in digital forensics in your day-to-day duties as a detective?
As a detective, it was every single day. Pretty much every case that came through the sheriff's office, with the way that everybody has a cell phone nowadays, so pretty much every case that came through would have a cell phone attached to it. And I was the one in charge of processing those, along with, like we said, any other cases, my internet crimes against children cases. Frequently there would be multiple devices, whether it be phones, tablets, or computers.
And when you're involved with digital forensics, is there an expectation that you maintain like ongoing education to stay up to date on recent trends?
Absolutely.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And can you explain kind of what types of training you would do to keep that training up?
So like I said, all those trainings that I attended at NCFI, they didn't all happen at one time. They were kind of staggered. The digital forensics community is constantly evolving because technology is constantly changing. So you have to stay within that realm to stay current.
And in your training and experience, in addition to downloading the phones themselves, do you also obtain social media accounts and access accounts in your law enforcement duties?
Yes.
And what types of social media sites do you do that with?
It really depends on the case. Social media is constantly evolving and changing as well. Every week there's a new app that people are on. So you have to have a basic understanding of social media accounts and how they kind of function. The common ones are obviously Facebook, Instagram, TikTok's getting really big, and then the internet crimes against children side of it has a whole nother series of websites that you can go down the rabbit hole of getting those as well.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Handing Deputy Rolling what's been marked as State's Exhibit 37. Do you recognize that document, Deputy Rolling?
I do.
What is it?
It's my curriculum vitae.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of your curriculum vitae?
Yes.
And that would show what types of things are shown on that.
Pretty much the training that we had just discussed.
Specifically as it pertains to digital forensics.
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I'd move to introduce State's Exhibit 37.
No objection, states 37, Your Honor.
Exhibit 37 will be admitted.
Are you familiar with the term Celebrate?
Yes.
And can you explain what that is?
Celebrate is a vendor for digital forensics technology. They primarily focus on both software and hardware options for digital forensics practitioners.
And in general terms, what do you use Celebrate for?
So Celebrate has many different capabilities. In our capacity within our department, we primarily use them for the extraction and analysis of mobile devices, so cell phones, tablets.
And what types of things can Celebrate pull from a cellular device?
That's heavily dependent on the device itself, the state the device is in, the software version that the device is running, and then the software version that Celebrate is running. But in general, with those given variables, you can get anything from nothing off of the device all the way to a full file system extraction, which can provide text messages, photos, videos, communications. I mean, it just kind of depends on, again, a lot of variables.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and turn your attention to March 14th, 2024. On that date, did you become involved with an investigation involving Christopher Behal?
I did.
And how did you become involved in this investigation?
I was called by Lieutenant Leonard
And do you remember when you were called by him?
shortly after 4 in the morning.
And maybe jumping forward just a little bit, what would your role eventually become in this investigation?
Lead investigator.
After receiving that initial contact by Lieutenant Leonard, what was your understanding as far as what was happening or what had happened?
Sure. He told me that there was a homicide investigation, that there was a suspicious death, and that I needed to get up, get ready, and come to the scene. That the suspect was already at the hospital, and that the victim was in Parkview.
And by this time, had a suspect already been identified?
Yes.
And who was that suspect?
Christopher Behal.
And do you see Mr. Behal in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you identify him and point out an article of clothing he's wearing?
He's sitting over to my right wearing a blue shirt with blue tie.
May the record reflect the witness identified the defendant?
The record shall so reflect.
You may have touched on this, but what was the status of Mr. Behal when you first started the investigation?
Once I was made aware of it, he was in Genesis East Hospital.
And after receiving that phone call from Lieutenant Leonard, what did you do first?
I took a quick shower to try and wake up, and then I proceeded to the scene.
And that'd be 105 Crestview, apartment number 4?
Correct.
When you arrived, was the scene secure?
It was.
And what does that mean to you, a scene being secure as a law enforcement officer?
It means that nobody else has been given the opportunity to enter the scene and tamper with it, or also that while we're working the scene that we're going to be safe.
And is that important when you're investigating a crime?
Yes.
Why?
Anything that could potentially be introduced to tamper with the scene could obviously steer us in the wrong direction for the investigation.
And the 105 Crestview address, that would be located in Scott County?
It is.
What did you observe when you arrived on scene?
It was still dark outside. It was raining. There was a large presence from the sheriff's office, multiple squads on scene. The residence was secured from both sides.
And I just asked you what you observed. What did you do when you arrived on scene?
I spoke with Deputy Turner to get an understanding of his involvement so far, to be able to accurately document in my search warrant application.
And when you arrived on scene, were you directed to a particular apartment number?
It was apartment number 4. I didn't specifically physically walk up there at that time.
Okay. After you spoke to Deputy Turner, what did you do at that point?
I remained in my vehicle. I typed up the search warrant application.
And did you obtain a search warrant
Yes,
to gain entry to the apartment itself?
yes,
And did you personally get that warrant signed?
I did. It was an electronic search warrant.
And after the warrant was signed, what did you do next?
After that, we started processing the scene.
And when you say processing the scene, what do you mean by that?
So Sheriff's Office staff will enter the scene and begin documenting where various items are, photographing it, and getting an understanding for what took place or what evidence may or may not be relevant.
Okay. And how long, I guess, did you physically go into the apartment after the warrant was signed?
I did.
What did you observe when you went into the apartment?
So I entered through the back door of the residence, as the front door was partially blocked. After entering in through the back door, which was the bedroom of the residence, we kind of looked around the room. I was one of the last individuals to enter. Others were in front of me taking photographs. One of the things that I immediately noticed was that there was a large bottle of alcohol, a large Hawkeye vodka bottle on the bed, and then we proceeded out of the bedroom towards the living room.
And at this time, have you been designated the lead investigator?
Yes.
And as your role of lead investigator, what responsibilities do you have beyond what any deputy would have there?
So as lead investigator, generally that's the individual that's going to interview and question the suspect. Outside of that, they're normally the one that's kind of orchestrating the investigation and steering it.
How long were you on the scene?
Without reviewing, I want to say approximately a half an hour.
And what were you doing while on scene?
While on scene, I was walking through the scene as it was being photographed so that I could get a general understanding for what the scene looks like to inform my interview once I spoke with the suspect.
After leaving the scene, where did you go next?
Genesis East Hospital.
And what did you do at the hospital?
I executed another section of the search warrant that was obtained, which was getting a blood sample.
From who?
From Mr. Behal.
What were your observations of Mr. Behal at the time you went to Genesis East?
He was laying in the hospital bed. He appeared to be in pain. Other than that, I didn't really have many observations.
You remember what time you arrived at the hospital?
I believe it was around 10 o'clock.
Okay, but you're not 100% sure on that?
Not without double checking.
Would have been sometime that morning?
Yes.
What else did you do while you were there?
Once the defendant was discharged from the hospital, I also collected the bed sheets that were on the bed that he was laying on.
Okay, and what's the purpose of obtaining a blood draw in this situation?
It was to attempt to ascertain his intoxication level.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
And the witness must have been marked as State's Exhibit 36-1 through 36-4. I'll give you a few moments to review those. Do you recognize what I just handed you?
I do.
And what are those in general terms?
These are the photographs that I took of the bed sheets that I seized.
And that would have been on March 14th, 2024?
Correct.
And the bed sheets from the bed the defendant was laying on?
Yes.
And are they fair and accurate copies of what you observed on that date?
Yes.
The state moves to introduce State's Exhibit 36-1 through 36-4. No objection, Your Honor.
Those exhibits will be admitted.
And permission to publish?
You may.
Starting with 36-1, can you just tell us what we're looking at here? And there is a pointer right behind you if that would assist you at all. Other side.
So this is the bed that the defendant was laying on. Here we have some blood, and down here there's also specks of blood.
So that'd be blood near the foot of or the bottom of the sheet, and then blood in the middle of the sheet roughly.
Correct.
Okay. 36-2, what are we looking at here?
So this is a mark that I placed on the bed sheet to denote the bottom of the bed sheet. When I collected it, my intention was to send it for testing, and I wanted to make sure that the correct orientation was maintained. There's also that same blood staining near where the feet would be.
Okay, and purposes of the record, you were referring to what looks like a black marker, letter B on the sheet.
That's correct.
Other than that, was the sheet altered in any way by you?
No.
36-3, what are we looking at in this photograph?
Again, this is just another angle to further capture the blood staining.
And 36-4.
More of the same.
Okay. Did you collect that bedding?
I did.
And what was the purpose for collecting that bedding?
My intention was to send it to the Iowa DCI for testing against the known DNA samples for the victim.
And what did you do after that?
After those were collected, I went back down to the courthouse here, where in the basement the sheriff's office has an interview room.
And were you the only law enforcement officer present during the interview?
I was not.
Who else was there?
Sergeant Greg Hill.
And what was the role for having Sergeant Hill there as well?
Very commonly in these higher profile investigations, it's normal for two individuals to be present during the interview, just to make sure that nothing gets missed, kind of for a sounding board for each other, for any possible questions to ask.
And going into the interview, did you have a plan for how to start that off?
Yes.
And what was that?
Generally speaking, in my interviews, I gather the same information from all the individuals I speak with.
And what kind of information do you initially gather?
Basic demographic information, things that are normally known to law enforcement before I start speaking with them.
And that's not necessarily information that's directly pertinent to the investigation.
Correct.
Is it still important to collect that information?
Yes.
Why?
It gives me a baseline for a few different things when I start the conversation with an individual, to gauge whether or not they're going to provide me with correct information. If I start speaking with them and immediately they're giving me incorrect information that I know to be false, that can inform my questioning. It also gives me a chance to get the individual speaking to make sure that I can ensure that they are comprehending what I am talking to them about.
And how would you describe the defendant's ability to understand, comprehend, and respond to questions you were asking throughout the interview?
I'm going to object to speculation. Obviously, he can comment on what he's seen, but not what he interprets with respect to his level of understanding.
I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Okay.
During the interview, was the defendant able to appropriately respond to your questioning?
Yes.
You said that you and Sergeant Hill were both present in the room. Was there kind of a lead investigator or lead interviewer?
Yes,
And who was that?
me.
Was that interview recorded?
It was.
And how was that recorded?
It was recorded through 3 different camera angles. There was one camera that's stationary in the interview room. There was my body-worn camera, which I removed and placed on the table facing the defendant. And then Sergeant Hill also had his body-worn camera on his waist at the time.
Okay. What was the first thing you did during the interview, if you remember?
I asked the defendant if he wanted anything to drink.
And was he Mirandized?
He was.
And was he Mirandized at the beginning of the interview?
Yes.
And for those members of the jury that may not know what that is, what does that mean when you Mirandize someone?
So that's the rights that everybody's read once they're in custody and they're going to be questioned by law enforcement. People are fairly familiar with them at this point in time now, thanks to television. But it basically informs the individual that's being spoken with that they have the right to essentially not talk to me if they wish to, or that they can have an attorney, that they can stop talking to me whenever they choose.
Did you ask the defendant about his phone?
I did.
And what information did he tell you about his phone?
He told me what kind of phone it was. He also provided me a PIN code.
And do you know, was the phone recovered from the scene, or from the apartment?
There was one. Yes.
And how many phones were recovered?
In total for the case, there were 2 phones.
Okay. And was Mr. Behal able to confirm which phone was his?
Yes.
Did Mr. Behal indicate whether or not he lived with anyone?
He did.
And who did he tell you that he lived with?
He said he lived with Taylor Escontrias.
And did he indicate what the relationship was between them?
Yes.
And what was that relationship?
They were in a domestic relationship, so they were romantically involved in living together.
And did he indicate how long they'd lived together?
He said approximately 6 months.
Did you ask him about vehicles, or a vehicle or vehicles that he owned or operated?
Yes.
And what did he tell you about that?
He said that he had driven his father's vehicle.
And did he give you the make and model of that vehicle?
Yes.
And what was that make and model?
He stated it was a 2012 silver Chevy Impala.
And was that the same vehicle that was involved in the accident?
Yes.
Did he tell you any medical conditions that he suffered from?
When I initially asked him, he stated he had acid reflux, anxiety, and depression.
Was there any discussion in reference to any type of seizure?
Eventually I asked how much alcohol he had consumed, and he stated that he consumes alcohol regularly, and my follow-up question to that is always, are you going to begin suffering from withdrawal seizures? And he said he didn't know, he might.
Okay. And at least initially, did he report any physical injuries to you?
Not when I asked specifically about medical conditions.
Okay. Did you ask whether he consumed any alcohol that day?
I did.
What was his response?
He said that he had, well, not that day, however, the evening prior.
Did he indicate how he was feeling as you were speaking to him?
When I speak with an individual and they tell me that they've been consuming alcohol, I always ask how they're feeling in terms of sobriety, and his direct response was pretty lucid.
And did he seem pretty lucid to you when you were speaking to him?
Yes.
Did he report what kind of drinker that he was?
Yes.
And what was his response?
He was a very heavy drinker.
Did he tell you when his last drink was?
He said he couldn't remember exactly, but he thought about 8 o'clock the night prior.
And did he indicate what he'd been drinking?
Vodka.
you see a lot in officer reports, indications of impairment, a lot of times in OWI investigations. Did you observe any of that while interviewing the defendant?
The only thing that I observed that I would characteristically also look for in an OWI investigation would be bloodshot and watery eyes.
And can anything else cause bloodshot, watery eyes other than intoxication?
Yes.
And in your training and experience, are you familiar with what at least some of those things might be?
Yes.
And what can cause bloodshot, watery eyes other than intoxication?
Various medications, most commonly, and what I attributed in this specific instance, sleep deprivation.
So lack of sleep can cause that as well?
Yes.
And when I asked that question previously, I didn't mean to limit it to what you look for in an OWI investigation. Was any other indicators of impairment that you observed while interviewing the defendant on March 14th?
No.
Did you note any slurred speech?
No.
Did you smell any alcohol?
No.
Did you ask the defendant if he was on any medication or narcotics?
I did.
And what was his response?
He stated that he was on medication for the acid reflux and that he was prescribed medication for the other ailments that he disclosed, but he wasn't currently taking them.
Did he indicate that he had been using any illegal substances?
No.
And did you have any reason to believe that to be the case?
No.
Did you eventually get into asking about the prior night?
Yes.
Did the defendant provide an account of what had happened on the prior evening?
He did.
And we'll get to the body camera eventually, but in general terms, do you recall what his initial account of the evening was?
The initial story that he provided, I guess summarized, would be that this was a argument that started based off a dispute, and that the victim had attacked him.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to break for the day. I would remind you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, and please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. Again, I'd ask that you return to the courthouse at 8:50 tomorrow morning, and we'll hopefully start around 9 o'clock. Thank you and enjoy your evening.
All rise for the jury.